Okay, so I thought we would look at some of the examples in book one where it's showing or representing the escalation of violence and how it was a gradual process of Nazi occupation of Poland, and how this project of eventual extermination started gradually, right? It wasn't overnight. There was sort of many indications that it would escalate into what it was, but there was no clear-cut signs that there was going to be a genocidal project taking place, right? The stages of violence were gradual. So let's look at some examples in the text where it's evident that this tension is building and violence is growing, and there's a looming threat of Nazi occupation in Poland. So while Vladek and Anya were on their way to Czechoslovakia, they see for the first time the Nazi flag. And this is one of the significant panels, I think, in book one, where, again, it's the first time we see the swastika image, and you get a sense of the shock and feelings of fear and dread of this sort of looming threat that is hanging over all of Europe. So there's an indication that Germany has sort of entered into Czechoslovakia, and there's a lot of indication that their influence is spreading across Europe. They haven't yet invaded Poland, but there is this sort of, again, this looming threat that's represented in that symbol of the swastika, which is, again, a very powerful image or symbol, and we now recognize it as a symbol of racism, genocide, and all the violence that occurred in World War II. At the time, it would have been, again, a very significant symbol of threat, but at the same time, it wouldn't have had the same. We know more now, I guess, in retrospect, than they did at the time. So they would have been curious, and you can see the depiction of the faces of the mice, the utter shock and curiosity and feelings of fear that are part of viewing this symbol for the first time. We also have uh, the Jews in the train car discussing, Vladek and Anya discussing rumors of what was going on in other parts of Germany. So they're talking about a pogrom, which is riots, violence in the towns, and they talk about how in some parts of Germany, Jewish families are having their businesses taken away from them. They are sort of persecuting and degrading Jewish civilians on the streets, and you can see the one Jewish man is forced to carry a sign. They talk about violence, the escalation of violence, beatings, and there is again evidence and stories of synagogues being burned, Jews being beaten for no reason, and whole towns being sort of cleared out or pushed out, all the Jewish families being pushed out into ghettos. So this is an indication of maybe what's to come, right? They don't know that Poland is going to be invaded. This is still, they're talking about parts of Czechoslovakia and Germany and the treatment of Jews in those countries. So again, there's sort of a foreshadowing of what's to come, and then we get this image of the swastika in the background that becomes very foreboding sense of the extension of the Nazi Party across Europe. Vladek is drafted into the Polish army in defense of the invading German army, and eventually he will become a POW, prisoner of war, under the Germans. So he is captured and again forced to work for the German soldiers. In this scene, it's interesting when we get a juxtaposition of the past and the present. So here's an indication of how Vladek's personality has been shaped or formed from his experience of suffering and hardship during World War II. So in the above half of the page, we get panels depicting Vladek as a prisoner of war having to clean a barn, a stable, and working very hard. And if he doesn't do his work, he will not be fed. So in the present, we get Art and Vladek having this conversation. Art is dropping cigarette ashes, and then Vladek makes a reference back to the stable. So he says, "You want it to be like a stable here." So he's again referring to the present as if it was sort of like the past and about his having to clean up the stable. So there is some sense that Vladek's personality has been formed from these experiences of past. His sort of obsessive compulsive behaviors to be very neat, orderly, clean, and in control of everything. These are some indications that sort of reflect the fact that a lot of his personality traits were formed during his definitive experience of survival in World War II, and that's pretty clear in this scene. Eventually, Vladek will be released as a prisoner of war, and he will gain his freedom once again. This scene, we get an indication of how much luck had to play in terms of survival. So even if you were like Vladek, very intelligent, very resourceful, very quick thinking, and very intuitive, strong, trusted his instincts, you could still be a victim of violence. In this scene, they're talking about the troop of war prisoners that were just released ahead of Vladek's group, and they were marched into the forest, and all 600 of them were killed. Vladek says, "We were the next party." So he could have just as easily been in that first group of men who were murdered. Luck has it, so there's just an element of fate or chance or random chance that allowed you to live for that next day. So anyway, we get a sense that there's the fear or the reality of death at any moment is very much a part of the mental struggle of survival, right? It's not just about your physical strength, the mental strain of knowing that any moment your life could be taken from you. That is also what Jewish civilians were living with at this time. So the escalation of violence is also evident in the fact that there's the beginning indications of rationing, the use of coupons, and the creation of the black market. So this would be an underground market that Jewish families could use to trade and get food and other materials that they need to just for the basic necessities of life that were not available to them now that the Nazis were occupying Poland. And again, there's indication there, if you read the bottom, it's dangerous. The Nazis take you off to a work camp for breaking any minor law. Worse, even if you don't break any laws. And those that are taken away, they're never seen again. So again, there's this growing threat of the worst case possibility being that you're taken away and never heard from again, even if you don't break the law. So even if they just don't like the look of you, or again, it's their whim of that day whether they send you away or not, if they can catch you, right? So it becomes about avoiding the threat of being caught and sent away. It's also clearly stated that at this point in time, Jewish businesses have been taken over by Aryan managers. So Vladek's family, Anya's father, his businesses have all been stripped of him. So they have no money coming in, and their factories are now taken over by the SS soldiers. Vladek uses his resourcefulness and has strong social skills as well, right? He has old friendships and acquaintances that he is able to negotiate with in order to make trades that will again allow him to provide for himself and Anya and then Anya's family as well. In this instance, we have Vladek using his social connections to sort of barter for a piece of material, and this will allow him to again sell it and make some money. And then in this way, he's able to provide some wealth for his family and help sort of be the breadwinner in this very difficult time. And then at the bottom there, it's sort of showing that he only gave half, right? He would save the other half. So Vladek was very intelligent, and again, he recognized that his family weren't saving money in the way that they had to. He always had an eye towards the future, the possibility. He was planning ahead of what might happen, thinking about the worst case scenario that maybe if they should start saving things now, saving wealth now, um, just in case things get worse in the future, and they all have these items that will become useful for them to trade and again support themselves when times get more difficult. So Vladek was always had this presence of mind to think ahead for the future. Other people did not have that same sense of resourcefulness and planning. So this is around 1941, and Vladek is walking through the streets, and there is a riot going on. People are being beaten, and they were grabbing Jewish civilians who had no papers. So you had to have your working papers, and if you didn't have the proper papers, then you could be taken and sent away, or they could shoot you on the spot. And this is one instance where, again, Vladek's life he survives based on his relationships. So he sees his friend, and then his friend saves him. So it's just the sort of matter of luck and random chance that he runs into his friend, and his friend lives close by, where he's able to stay safely for a few hours until this riot dies down. And at the same time, we also learn that if it's all depends on sort of how you carry yourself. Vladek says, if I walked slowly, they will take me. Will I run? They can shoot me. So again, he has very little chance or opportunity, and it has a lot to do with just the luck of being able to hide and find safety for yourself in this moment of life or death. So we have another example. So escalating of violence occurs, and there's the notification that all Jewish families are going to be relocated. So this is the moving of Jewish people into ghettos, which we talked about. And if you look in the background, you can see that there were rewards. So every Jewish individual had to be registered. So placed within this systematic catalog, every single person of Jewish descent had to be registered. And there's an indication for Polish people to sort of bring in or register any Jew that you know, and you will be rewarded with a kilo of sugar if you did that. So whole Jewish communities again were rounded up and moved to ghettos, and Vladek here is talking about all 12 of their household were given 2.5 small rooms within the ghetto. But even as we saw in those photographs in an earlier lecture, some people weren't so lucky to even have an apartment to live in. Many were left on the streets, and there was barely any necessities.